And it looks like we are live.
Cool.
Okay. So this is our RunJumpDev November monthly meeting. And this month we have two fine folks. Andrew and Matt from Hitcents, who are going to talk to us this month about game development. And I'm sure we'll have a few of you tuning in as we go. We're here in Lexington, Kentucky at Awesome Inc., who are kind enough to provide us with space to have our little shindigs and our meetings. And without further ado, I will turn it over to you guys. Could you guys introduce yourself, talk a little bit about what you do?
Yeah. So I'm Andrew. I'm the lead game developer at Hitcents.
I'm Matt Bitner. I'm the lead game designer at Hitcents, and also a developer at Program Some too.
We have a short PowerPoint that we can go through that will tell you all a little bit about Hitcents and what we do. And and then we'll open up for questions, I suppose. So, y'all see the PowerPoint?
Yep, looks good.
Cool. All right. So, like we said, I'm Andrew, and that's Matt. And you can talk about it.
Yeah, Hitcents is based out of Bowling Green, Kentucky, not too far from Lexington. I'm sure some people have been there. We've got about 15 people in app development, but we've got like 60 employees that do like web development and advertising and a lot of other things. But our app department's 15 people, with maybe about 10 or 12 that work on games at any different time. Like they also do just conventional mobile apps. But we have a design team. We have 3 game programmers now, and 4 other developers that just do general programming for apps. We've got a art and animation team, and we've got one dude doing QA testing who we thought might be here but couldn't make it. His name's Glenn. He's great. And then we have our project manager, Luigi. He does things.
All right.
Yeah.
So Luigi would want us to mention we also have
Oh, yeah.
offices in China and San Francisco and LA, but this is our primary office here in Bowling Green. So we're going to start by talking about these are some screenshots of some projects that we worked on before we worked at Hitcents, and so we came from, I guess, an indie development point where like some of these are some projects that I worked on while I was studying at Western, and Matt worked on some with some friends, right?
Yeah. Me and another developer who ended up getting a job here made a game called Trials of Droids. We made it in ActionScript 3. I did it all through Flixel, and it was a little puzzle platformer where you controlled 2 robots and switch back and forth between them, and like use teleporters and things like that to navigate. And also made a game called My Robot Is Fight, which is another little platformer that's kind of like a roguelike platformer, I guess you'd say. And both those games, I think, helped me get the job here because I was able to put them on the resume and all of that. And then, Andrew, you could tell them about Carl. And
So I had, before I came to Hitcents, I went for a workshop at DigiPen. I don't know if you know about DigiPen Institute, but they were up in Washington. And I went a couple different years and worked on a couple different games. There's one sort of in the top rightish area. It looks like Mario pushing a cannon. That was Cannon Miner was a game I made when I was, I think, like 14 or so when I went up there. And then I went and I made Star Wings, which was like a multiplayer Star Fox ripoff type thing, which is in the top right. And then just while I was at Western, I made a couple games. Like we had in our CS department, we had an intermediate and senior software project. So for my intermediate project, I made a space puzzle type game, which is over on the left side. And then on the far right side, for my senior project, I made sort of a space shooter game because I like space games and I make a lot of space games. So that's what I've overdone. But yeah, those are some examples of projects that we worked on before we came to Hitcents. So now that we've worked at Hitcents for a while, these are some games that we have released and one that's upcoming. So you want to talk about?
Yeah. It's the next side, Stickman. Like the first game we ever made was Draw Stickman Epic, and it was based off a website we had launched called drawstickman.com, where it wasn't quite a game, it was more of an interactive story where it would ask you to draw several things and then integrate your drawings into a story that would get told, where this Stickman fights a dragon and a lot of other fun stuff happens. And it was really successful. It won like a few Webbies, and also did really well on the App Store, so they decided to make a game. And that was about around the time I started working there. I had planned to just do like indie game development on my own, and then program applications and like point of sale stuff here in my work time. But it ended up, as soon as I started, they wanted to make a game, and it turned out to be a Draw Stickman Epic, and it's kind of like a throwback King's Quest puzzle point and click thing that integrates a few other genres. It's a little confused and cluttered in retrospect, actually. I don't know if anybody's had a chance to play it, but I guess the big things there were we were able to develop it for like every mobile platform all at once using Mono and Mono Game at the time, and we later ended up porting it to Steam with some success. We used Community Express, which is a nice little SDK that lets you integrate Steamworks into your like XNA project or whatever project, and beyond that, we were able to put it on Humble Bundle. We got on the Humble Store, and then it was released in Humble Bundle PC and Android.
Yeah, I think it was 10. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it was 10. But yeah, it was a fun game to work on, and then it allowed us, like, it was successful enough that they were like, okay, we're going to keep making games, and from there it kind of emerged in this whole game department we have now, where we're, working on lots of little projects all at once. The next game we worked on was Battlepillars, and it was around that time. It was kind of like the end of Epic, right when Battlepillars was gearing up, that Andrew started, and we worked on Battlepillars together. You can talk about that.
Yeah. So Battlepillars is a real-time multiplayer strategy game. It's sort of a left and right 2D tug-of-war type game.
Like Swords and Soldiers.
Yeah. So basically you've got two bases on either side, and you're on the left, and your opponent's on the right, and you're trying to push through their defenses and get to their base so you can destroy it. So it was a game developed for mobile in mind, but eventually we did port it to Steam and made a bunch of improvements and drastically like rebalanced the game and everything, and added a bunch of new features for the Steam audience. And
we prefer the Steam version to the mobile.
Absolutely. Yeah, we used XNA Mono Game again to develop Battlepillars, and then we ported it with Community Express. So it was also one of the first games to use Google Play Services multiplayer API, and so we partnered sort of with Google to get that out early, and I think they talked about us in one of their conferences that we were able to do real-time multiplayer through their services. And then the game that we're working on now is the sequel to the biggest game is in development through Unity, and so this is our first big Unity project. We've been learning it for 7 or 8 months or something.
Yeah,
like
a while
that.
now.
Yeah. And so we're trying to push for a synchronous release for iOS and Steam, just to, we're giving it there for the fans of the original game, and also releasing it to a Steam market as a point-and-click adventure. And so it is our first 3D commercial title to put on there, and we're planning for launch in early-ish 2015.
yeah, early-ish, mid-2015 maybe. We'll see how that goes, but it should be a big improvement over the first game. It's turning out to be really fun.
Yeah. So we've got, I think, now 8 levels planned, and it's
9. We'll count the last level, yeah.
I think it's bigger in scope than the first game. It's more.
Yeah, the first game may have actually had more levels, but they were much shorter and much less involved. They were tied together. There's a lot more going on with this one. More puzzles per level, interactable NPCs, a lot of fun stuff.
Yeah. So. And so here we just have some frameworks and stuff that we use, and so this is just meant to show that we had choices to make when we were developing games. And so like for Stickman and for Battlepillars, we used XNA with Mono Game and Xamarin to make a game that we could push out cross-platform and put on any store that we wanted. And then now using Unity, obviously Unity is really good for cross-platform development, so we can easily make builds for Android and iOS and PC and anything we need to, and we can use Community Express to port all that to Steam.
Yeah. And I guess I forgot to mention this when I was talking about Epic, but prior to using Unity, we had to write our own animation tools and everything for both that we used for both Battlepillars and Stickman. In Stickman and part of Battlepillars, everything was done in Flash. All the animators would animate everything through Flash, and then we wrote ActionScript 3 exporter that would spit all that out as data that we then turn around and animate through XNA, and that was really interesting. It's much nicer to use Unity 3D where all that's taken care of for you and you don't have to write your own tools. But I don't know, that was an interesting point.
Yeah.
Unity's better for doing that.
All right, so I think that's it for our presentation. We'll I guess open it up for questions now.
Yeah, we can open it up for questions.
Cool. Yeah. I can start us off, I guess.
Cool.
I was curious. You said you've got locations like not only in Bowling Green but also like San Francisco and China and stuff. Do you guys interface with those teams? Like, do you have like cross-site collaboration, or are you pretty self-contained?
The office in China opened up after we did a localization for Draw Stickman and Epic to China, where they wanted to get on like the 50 different mobile stores that are in China. It was kind of a big headache, but it was ultimately, I guess, kind of cool that we got it to work. And that enabled us for them to open up a little office over there in China with, I think, 3 other developers, and they're working mainly on like taking independently developed games in the U.S. and helping them localize those for release in China. And we've talked to them a little. Like, I'll come up with game pitches and game ideas, and they'll mock up art for them and everything. So that's really cool to work with them on that. The L.A. and San Francisco offices, I think, are more focused on just like trying to find people we might work for or make games for right now. So
yeah, so we had one of our head guys, Chris Mills. He went to China for how long was it? It was like 6 months, wasn't it?
it was like too much of his life for a very long time. He was over in China.
So he went there to open the China office and he stayed there with his family for a long time, and then he's back here now. But in addition, Ed Mills, he went to California to open the LA office, and so he's still there. He might be moved there, I guess.
Yeah, it's odd. Like when we were developing Draw Stickman Epic, it was like we worked out of an old mall.
Yeah.
Like we were in an old mall in Bowling Green, like developing, and like it was sort of indie, and it's like blown up into this. We've got this big office downtown, and now there's like little branches opening everywhere. So it's kind of cool to see that happen.
Wow, that's awesome. I suppose you probably weren't working on any zombie titles during the period in the mall.
No, we hadn't done anything in the old mall.
All right. Well, let's see. Question? Cool.
So you talked about how you had done Steam version of your games as well as sort of the mobile. Can you maybe compare the two communities and what they feedback on the different games, and maybe the challenges with developing one for one sort of the PC versus maybe mobile, and kind of how you approach those things?
Yeah, with mobile, there's a lot of pressure to, I think, develop premium titles that people can just try out without paying for them, and then integrating in-app purchases and things like that into the design. And I think it's a lot more difficult to create a fun-to-play game when you have to kind of work around those design constraints. And it was really liberating to get to port those games to Steam. Like in Battlepillars, we could take out the store and we could take out all the in-app purchases and kind of refocus the balance of the game in a way that it can just be played and enjoyed by people that pay like a straight-up premium price for it. Me and Andrew, I think, are both big PC gamers more than we are people that play a lot of mobile games. So we're hoping to move more in a PC direction. We kind of started doing mobile apps, so that's why our first few games were on mobile. But we're hoping that we're going to be able to like develop more for PC and times. As far as developing between the two and doing the ports, I guess the biggest thing is changing like the pricing model and refocusing how those design elements motivate people to play the game. And
yeah, so both of our titles on Steam are flat prices. I think they're both $5 right now on Steam.
Yeah.
And it was sort of with Draw Stickman Epic, it was our way of testing the waters for putting it on Steam. So Draw Stickman Epic was a premium title on Android and iOS. And so we released it on Steam, and we added some extra challenge, like we added some more difficult areas and stuff like that.
I don't know if it's as successful as a port. Like Battlepillars, I think is really high rated on Steam. Like it's not been played by a lot, but like Stickman has some rough ratings, and I think that's just due to like it was a mobile game and we ported it. But it did give us this awesome window where we could start making games on Steam and start, like focusing more on that.
So for Battlepillars, with Battlepillars, we gave it a lot more love. Like we built the game as sort of, I mean, it felt kind of out of place on mobile, honestly, because it was like, I mean, it's a real-time strategy game. It's a fun multiplayer game that seemed like it would fit a little bit better on PC, and like the audience is a little bit, wishy-washy.
Yeah.
We put it on Steam, and we took out all in-app purchases. We made it a $5 flat game, and we added a whole bunch of new content. And Draw Stickman Epic has a bigger weight just because more people know about it, and it went viral when it first came out and stuff like that. But Battlepillars has a less of a user base, but it has greater ratings as far as people seem to enjoy it a lot when they play the game. So I think that's encouraging.
And I guess just from a design perspective, like UI is a big thing on mobile. Like when we were designing Stickman Epic and then even Battlepillars for mobile, like the UI has to be huge because you've got this, and it just changes the game space completely because you have to take up so much of the screen with these big buttons. Like I think on a phone, like each button has to be at least 44 by 44 pixels or bigger for people to be able to press them. And then when you go to PC, you've just got all this like room to.
Yeah, a bigger thing is that for space of an app, like we have constraints of like 50 megabytes on iOS and Android for games, which is ridiculous. And so for Steam, we went all out and we made higher res art, we made better music, and we added 10 new levels, and we ended up with like 350 megabytes or something like that, which is fine, but it just didn't fly on mobile. So we were able to add so much more content. We spent a lot of time and made hotkeys for PC users, made the UI a lot more easier to handle.
The music was a big thing for me because for both our mobile titles, we just had to compress like we wrote the music. I wrote all the music for Epic 1, and then we both wrote the music for Battlepillars.
Yeah.
And for mobile, it's got to be mono, and it's got to be like 96 KB if you want more than like 5 tracks. It's where you cut first when you're cutting content to get under that like Wi-Fi limit of 50 MB. So.
Cool. Okay, we've got another question. I'll hand it over.
Sorry. Yeah, you were mentioning, you kind of mentioned something about like a button being like 44 by 44 pixels, and you were really specific. I wasn't sure if like you had like a specific resource in mind or something as far as when designing like for mobile.
I think iTunes has some guidelines. I got that handed down to me from John, who was our like senior developer, and we have like in-house guidelines as far as like the size buttons need to be and like how much space you can use for this or that.
Yeah, I think it was just from like iTunes submission standards, like they require, like they'll reject an app if there's buttons that are too small.
Yeah. I wish I could give you a specific resource, but I can't think of it off the top of my head.
But that's an official iTunes guideline.
I don't know if it's specifically official, but there are guidelines like that. The 44 button pixel thing might be something we do here, but and that's relative to all the different screen resolutions, which are nicer on iOS, by the way. If you develop for Android, you're dealing with a lot more.
Yeah,
and that in and of itself is kind of a headache developing for mobile.
Okay. Also, another question for Battlepillars for mobile. What convinced you to go towards in-app purchases versus like a pay once?
I think the reason we decided to go with that was at the time, like, if you look at even just top grossing apps or you look at figures on which apps were making money, they're all freemium. It's not necessarily the model I would prefer, and at the time I wasn't the lead. We're going to try to make Epic do actually premium. Premium model works really well for certain kinds of games. I think games that have infinite play cycles and games that aren't necessarily linear. There's some ways to make it really work, but when you're trying to design like an adventure game or something like that, it's tricky. Yeah, we went with the premium basically because we thought we might make more money. At the end of the day, that was what it was. We tried on that.
Okay, so we're having issues getting our video back. We're going to try to fix it while we're talking about it. We can just talk with audio here.
Yeah, our faces aren't that interesting anyway. So. I guess that cut out at like the worst point. Like the last thing I'd say was like, "Oh, we just made it premium for money." But no, and I mean there are other reasons too. I think the reason you might get more money making a premium game for mobile is also people are more likely to download and play it. The premium market for mobile apps is more competitive, and people are just much less inclined to pay even like $5 to just check out a game and see what it's like without a lot of promotion or something to hook them in and get them aware of it. So that's why we did that with Battlepillars, and the gameplay sort of lent itself to being able to do in-app purchases for like in-game currency because it was a strategy game where you earned things by playing, and you could augment that or progress through the game a little quicker if you spent some money, at least the single player. One thing we were really sure to do when we did Battlepillars was try not to like sell power with our in-app purchases.
Yeah.
Our multiplayer is really nice because you have it's kind of like really dumbed down GoldenEye settings where you could select which segments you allow in the multiplayer match, and it could be segments that either player owns. So you could set it to maximum, and then all players would have access to like equip their loadout with any segments any player has access to. So we didn't want to make it something where the multiplayer experience was like ruined or tainted in any way by in-app purchases,
right.
I guess, or having things that just make it unfair.
One of the things is that we had a lot of cosmetic skins that you could equip your army with, which they had little minimal bonuses and detriments or whatever, but everything that you could get through in-game, like through playing a normal game. So.
I think that's ultimately like, if we did anything wrong in Battlepillars, it was that we didn't force the monetization enough. Like it was maybe too easy to play and actually progress and get everything without ever paying any money. So we maybe overcorrected in trying to make it not pay to win. And I think we've learned a lot from that as far as like there's better ways to.
But I think both of us agree that it works better as a premium title on Steam. It's got much better reception, and people seem to enjoy it and play the multiplayer and stuff. So it's a thing where we have a personal preference for premium games. I think it's just that in that specific instance, the people who have money will control what happens. So.
Yeah. Well, yeah, and I don't want to give the impression I think freemium's inherently wrong. I think it's just a lot more difficult to design around. Like it's a lot easier to design like a tight system if you've got a premium game where you're not also having to motivate payment behavior through the gameplay. So.
Okay. I think we want to do one from Twitter first. Yeah. We'll come back. Okay. Cool. So we've got a question from Twitter. I'm going to hand the mic over to Amanda.
Sorry. We have a question from Twitter. Doing the multiplayer for Battlepillars, what were the biggest obstacles?
Working on Battlepillars multiplayer. We worked on Samsung first, right?
Yeah. We had a thing where if we could get multiplayer working for Samsung's like multiplayer service, which is called Cord at the time, mention us or feature us on the store or something along those lines. And it was surprisingly easy, actually. We thought it was going to be a lot more difficult, but we used their SDK, and it was kind of the first multiplayer experience we tackled that was more than just like a little demo or a little thing where colored dots run around and you get to see them both on screen. I
think I was gone for like a couple of days, and I came back and I was like, we got multiplayer down, and I was like, what?
Yeah, we thought it was going to be a lot harder than it was. I think the biggest challenge was synchronizing just player behavior, like writing that from scratch, where when I do something over here, it happens at the right time over there, and both the games are in sync, and it's just kind of negotiating an agreement between the two. Like you send a request, and this is like, I got your request. It's okay to go ahead and execute whatever you were about to do in a second or two, or half a second, or however long. And beyond that, there was something else I was going to say. I forgot. I just spaced. But yeah, I mean, I think that was the biggest challenge, was just getting synchronization. And it didn't take that long to find a good system to do that, or like just a good pattern.
Yeah, we had a long time there when we were testing it where we would have two people playing against each other, and they're both like, I won. It's like they're so out of sync that they would have issues with choosing who's on the winner.
I remember what I was going to say. Battlepillars was probably particularly easy because it was very deterministic.
Yeah.
It was not like things running around in real time or anything like that. You did like make selections and then you'd launch a Battlepillar and they'd kind of fight automatically. So it was something where you weren't synchronizing a lot of positions all at once or sending a lot of commands all at once. Like because the game was so deterministic, you only had to synchronize a few instances of sending out units. So
I think one of the things was that I think that in a single player game, when you send out a unit, it comes out instantaneously. And I think for multiplayer, we had to like delay it by like not really a visible amount, but it was like something like less than a second. You had to wait before your unit would come out to sync it up, things like that.
We had a structure set up that would get commands and then execute them after a time if it got a confirmation and things like that. We recently made a prototype for a little FPS that we can't talk too much about, but we did that through Unity, and that was surprisingly easy to get going using like their native RPC stuff and all that. Yeah, we did that in one weekend. We did like a little game jam where we got it running. We were running around and fighting each other and stuff. It was really fun. So I think just overcoming the hurdle of like multiplayer is intimidating to implement. With a little time, you can get it working if you have good tools.
Cool. Let's see. Yeah, I think. Well, good job.
Back to the whole premium title thing. When you were developing your game, did you find that the commerce system imposed a lot of limitations on what you could do with the game design, or did you have to omit certain features you wanted because of it?
It's kind of tricky. We tried to stay focused on the fact that it was going to be a freemium title and not think of things that might lend themselves to a premium title. But it did kind of force us to think in a line of like things need to be very resource motivated and things need to be very much motivated by behavior you might be able to monetize or focused on having a really fun play experience, but constructing it in a way that is I guess timed, or that people that wanted to pay for the convenience of experience the content quicker, which is a big thing with mobile games where people, like some players want to dig in and experience the content at a slow rate and enjoy it, but then on mobile titles there's people that just are playing it on the go. They're playing on the train or they're playing on a bus, and you have to accommodate both forms of play and then allow your monetization to let people play it quickly or let people rush through content. So it did kind of, I guess, subconsciously alter the entire way that we planned out the game. Yeah.
We've gotten some people talk about the Steam version of Battlepillars, and they're like, oh, it's really annoying because you have to grind for certain resources and stuff like that, because we tried to do our best with balancing it so that it would be in a situation where you could get enough through playing the normal game that you could run through it. And like sometimes, Battlepillars is an easy game. It's pretty tough, and so there will be people that'll call us out and they'll say like, this should have been on mobile with in-app purchases, and it's like, well, But I think we've gotten in a good place with the additional content we added on Steam and the way we rebalanced everything that it feels like a premium title.
Yeah, when you're doing a premium game, you do have to like implement things like grinding and things that are kind of repetitive experiences where you might be able to just if you're making a premium title, you don't have to worry about that. You design something that's fun, and that's your only concern. And when you're designing something that's freemium, it's got to be fun and also something that people would be willing to like pay for throughout the experience. Like, I guess at its best, like collectible card games are good freemium experiences. Like, I play Magic the Gathering, and I'm happy to go spend money on packs of cards, or I play Warhammer 40K. And I drop way too much money on that game. But it's because it feels really rewarding and it doesn't unbalance the whole thing. So.
We got a bunch of people in the office that play Hearthstone and have spent way too much money on that game.
Hearthstone's a great example of a well-done premium game, at least in our opinion. So.
Cool. We've got another Twitter question.
Hi. The question is, what's the best advice to releasing mobile games when there are so many?
Did you say that again? Couldn't hear that.
Audio glitch.
No problem. What's the best advice to releasing mobile games when there are so many?
Oh, okay.
When there are so many mobile games?
Yeah, like basically how do you stand out?
Well, I mean, for me, I just want to make something that's fun that people will talk about. Like, if it's hard in a situation where it feels like you almost have to have like a marketing team to get your feet off the ground. But word of mouth goes a long way, I think.
Try and make something fairly original, honestly. Like, don't make AAA casino slots or, something that's been done 100 times, or there's a lot of different versions of. Like, you can totally make a mobile, like, match 3 game, but, like, put your own spin on it, put your own twist on it, make it something that's really stands out from other little match 3 games that are mobile games. I guess that's the best advice, is just try and come up with something original that stands out or doesn't, blend in with the crowd. Or
yeah, anything that I can think of that has gone popular on mobile in like the past year seems to have been something that had a big word of mouth following. Like, I think Monument Valley got its start with word of mouth, and like, I mean, that's how Minecraft on PC started. Obviously, like, Minecraft on mobile is different, but even with, like, there was a game that I played that was called Black. I don't know if any of you played it, but that was a thing where I'd heard about it from friends, and it seemed like it was really neat, and I went and checked it out, and it was great, and it got popular, and it was a pretty fun game.
There's 2 Dots on Android, I think, right now, which is free, and it's a similar mechanic of, it's very simple. You're matching dots up, but done in an interesting other things. Like, it's a fun experience.
Yeah, and even like talking about, like, not necessarily a great example, but with Flappy Bird, it was entirely word of mouth that people were like, I went and played it, and it went viral overnight where people enjoyed the experience, and so it was, I mean.
So it's difficult, I guess, if we're talking about word of mouth, that's a difficult thing to pull off. So it's part luck and, part the effort and love you put into it to make it something that's really unique.
Yeah, whenever I'm trying to focus on a project for myself, I'll usually I like to say that I make games that I would like to play. Like, if you make something and you're halfway through development and you're starting to play it for fun and you realize, like, this is a fun game, then you've gotten to a good spot,
Yeah. Stickman Epic had a drawing mechanic. Like, it's definitely a flawed game in retrospect, but it had a unique mechanic that I don't think things around that time had going on for him, or hadn't done in that way.
Yeah, and the idea with Battlepillars just being like that you could build your own units out of different segments of a caterpillar was kind of a unique idea, I think.
There definitely been tug of war games, but it was modular units and that kind of thing.
Cool. Cool. Yeah.
I was wondering how difficult you found it to move from tools like Monogame to developing with Unity, and what did you do to learn Unity?
Well, one of the biggest things is that Unity has out-of-the-box support for C#, which is what we used for XNA, and so we all knew C#. So it was pretty easy to get started. The biggest difference for me, at least, I don't know about you, but for me, was that Unity uses scripts in a way that's very different from any other framework. Like, it's not building classes upon each other to make a concurrent unit. It's building objects out of different components that you add to units. So it's sort of a modular type way of coding in C# that was kind of new. But we spent some time when we first knew that we were going to use Unity. We spent some time making a prototype for a game that I think we got it up and running in a couple of weeks, and after that it seemed pretty easy to progress.
Yeah, I kind of agree with you. Like, with conventional game programming, like when I'd write Flash games with Flixel, or when I'd just write XNA games, you have like kind of your main game loop, and then you have like your classes that define objects and the things that inherit from those, and you kind of like stack up layers of inheritance. And with Unity, you end up with a lot more, like, you might attach 4 scripts to an object to get it to do what you need to do, or you create like kind of these, like, the modular way that Unity works was probably the most foreign thing, or the thing that I think I fought against the most when we first started doing it. It's like, no, we need to, like, use inheritance. A creature is a creature, and then a creature that flies is a flying creature, and then so forth and so on. But with Unity, you want to do, like, you've got your flying control and you've got your creature control, and you split things up in a more modular way than a stacky way, I guess, is the most simple way to describe it.
Okay. So is the new Draw Stickman 3D, and is it using 3D assets and stuff? And what was the, if so, what was the train from 2D to 3D artwork and all that?
So we started off with that. We were playing around with it. Well, we were going to make it an XNA, was our first thought. We were going to just make a sequel to Draw Stickman that was really similar. And then we toyed around with the idea of playing with Unity, and so we looked. It was right around the time they released their 2D tools, and so we were looking into using it in 2D. And then some of us were talking. It was probably mainly me that messed it up.
You were like, I want to do 3D.
Yeah. So what
we did.
What we ended up doing is we looked at games like Don't Starve, where they have 2D assets, but they're in a 3D space.
Yeah, I was really pumped about Don't Starve when we first started doing Epic 2. So it's like this 2.5D view where you have a sense of space and a sense of position in the world, but it's still 2D assets, because at the time we only had 2D artists. Yeah, so we started with that, and I made a little test zone where we used assets from Epic 1, and I showed some of our managers here, and they thought it was really neat. So we went on with that, and we started making Epic 2 in Unity. And so we have a plane that everything exists on, and then the camera is tilted to a 30-degree angle at the ground. So the Stickman is like if you imagine this is the ground, the Stickman's sitting here like this, and the camera is looking at it like this. So you've got this sense of space, but it's using mostly 2D assets. And for certain things, like we have a persistent world in Stickman where we've got different chapters, but you see sort of the same area. And so one of the big things was we have this giant mountain in the middle of the map, which we hired a 3D artist so that we could have a model of this map, because it's in real space, where we had to have the Stickman like climb up a hill and go up, and you can really do that well with 2D assets. So we have some things like that, like we have some machinery of our levels that made more sense as 3D objects where you could like draw into it and things like that. One of our levels, we have a level in a cave that's entirely modeled in 3D. Like the environment's in 3D, and then the creatures themselves are 2D. And all our 2D assets, it's weird because we wanted to capture this drawn feeling. So our 2D assets have to like billboard to the camera. As the camera moves, they tilt in space.
Yeah.
So
it's the same thing that Don't Starve does to keep their perspective.
Yeah.
Is that they'll have these objects on this plane and they're tilted, but then as the camera moves up, it'll move up so that it doesn't take it out of the plane. So it doesn't look like it's something that's like a thing stuck in the ground. So it looks more like it's a 2D asset in a 3D world.
And I guess back to the original question, I think one of the challenges going from 2D to 3D, at least for me, I think you were a lot more comfortable going in 3D when we first started, and I was very much stuck in this like pixel art 2D world. And I think getting used to 3D tools like ray casting and like sphere collision and a lot of the built-in stuff that Unity has, and learning to use those tools to solve certain problems rather than like conventional mathing it all out logic makes things a lot quicker, because when I first approached it, I wanted to do everything kind of by hand or whatever, and getting to use those Unity tools is it's helpful. Like Unity is a great way to get into 3D because it just has so much that it does for you already.
Yeah, when I was in college, I started playing around with Unity, and I was really intimidated by it, and I thought it was like way out there, and I wouldn't be able to use it. And so then I came back to it here being at Hitcents, and they'd improved their tutorials, and they'd improved their interface and everything, and it was like, this is a great time to start learning. And so we started it, and that's basically like developing Epic 2 over the course of like a year now, almost.
Yeah.
Has been a good learning experience for us, so we feel comfortable with Unity.
Well, I had a question. If I can remember it. Oh, okay. So you guys seem to have a fair amount of jam experience, and I was kind of wondering, like, beyond the typical, reduce scope and get sleep and drink fluids and things like that. Like, do you guys have any particular tips or tricks or like things you don't think are widely practiced for getting a game jam done or getting a project done for?
Well, for this project that we had mentioned that we'd done over a weekend, this past weekend, it was something where we were all really excited about it. And I think motivation is very important for something like this. Like, if you have a game that somebody's not happy about, they're not going to do good work. So, like, I mean, it's cheesy, but that's like the biggest thing for me was that, like, I was willing to come into work on a weekend for free and do this because it was something exciting to me, you know?
Yeah, I guess to go along with that, like a big thing is planning so you don't get stuck. Because I think it's very easy to start on something like, I gotta tackle this whole collision system for, like how to collide with our water shader or something crazy like that. And as long as you have other things you can do, like other things you can focus on, like if you get stuck writing the water collision system or just doing something that's really arduous, you can always go to another task. So like planning out everything you're going to have to do and then being able to swap between them, I think is really helpful. I guess that's the only thing as far as staying motivated and staying committed to a project and like, just sticking with it when things get kind of boring or grueling or you're working on something boring.
It's like a classic thing that they talk about, like leaving a problem and coming back to it and doing it better. And it's really true. Like if you keep tabs on everything you have to do, like I'll have a day where we're working on Epic 2 and I'll be banging my head against the wall about a problem and I don't want to do this. I'm going to go on to this other level and start implementing something else that I can come back to in an hour and I'll figure it out,
Yeah, it helps. We have like a project manager and like project management software and stuff that gives everybody like, we do sprints where we have like lists of tasks and everything that we can all kind of pick and choose as we get things done. We can just grab another one and get them, through. We plan everything out that way. But you can do that without fancy software. You just got, you list on paper and get them done in that way, I guess.
Well, one thing that was helpful for this thing that we did last week is we got some assets from the Unity Asset Store, which is sort of a unique repository or whatever. So it's a way that you can, like, if you don't have, like when we were doing it, it was just us and a couple other guys, and none of us are artists. So we took, we bought an asset pack from the Asset Store and quickly, like, sort of prototype things together, and it was an easy way to get started real quick. And so if you have, basically, I mean, just in general, if you have something that somebody else has done, you can try to not reinvent the wheel, use things that are out there for you.
Yeah, just starting with anything where you've got a whole game engine like Unity and you have the asset store and you can pull things. Like, if you're a small team, do that. Like, it may not feel as legit as writing everything from the ground up, but you'll realize what you're wanting to realize a lot faster, and that'll keep you motivated. So. Yeah.
Cool. Yeah, we had a game jam a couple of weeks ago where we were developing stuff for our arcade cabinet. So we've got kind of unique constraints in that you only have basically a pad and button, like all digital inputs. So when you're trying to think about things like first-person shooters or twin-stick analog kind of things, like they don't work as well when all you have are these digital inputs.
Yeah. Is this the little Lexitron?
Yes. Yes.
Oh, I love it. It's so much fun. I got to play it last.
Oh, fantastic! Yeah.
So.
Did you? Else? Okay.
So, I guess, how did you approach brainstorming or coming up with ideas or maybe levels or that kind of thing? Maybe coming up with ideas for the game or for new games or that kind of thing. How do you approach that? Do you have everyone involved? Is there like one person that does it? What's your process?
It's weird. When Epic 2 started, it was kind of like me and two other guys in a room, and we were just brainstorming everything, and we kind of like planned out and scoped out the whole game. And in retrospect, that might have been the wrong way to do it because we're reaching levels now and stuff where we had planned that just don't make sense in the context of what we've implemented. And what we've started doing is like bringing everybody in the team in a conference room, and we just like rework a level. And I think going forward, we're going to do a lot more where we involve everybody as needed. Like, you definitely, I think, have one or two people coming up with like a core concept or a basic or what the basic gameplay might be, and then as necessary, you can bring people in for input and to figure out if your ideas are actually good. Like, there's a lot of stuff, puzzles I've come up with for Epic 2, and it helps to get everybody in a room, and they're like, no, that doesn't make any sense or won't work. And like, I think doing that as you're planning the game is a lot better than like trying to pre-plan everything.
Yeah, it's easy to think that when you have a big group of people that it's just going to be sort of like arguments left and right, that it's just going to be everybody has different ideas. But if you have a core central idea that's set out, so like Matt's our lead designer, he'll come up with a clear idea of what the level should be in general, but then we'll leave it open to the group and we'll all like pitch out ideas like maybe we should have a puzzle where this happens and something, and then like everybody will be like, yeah, that's great, or no, that's terrible.
Yeah, so. That's how we approached like in-game designs. And then as far as concepts, like we did a series of brainstorms with the former lead designer who actually, he left to become a minister in Texas, and we just would all sketch out ideas on the board. Like, we draw one picture and then kind of like take turns describing our little picture and trying to flesh it out into an actual feasible game idea. And that seemed to work well. We came up with a lot of interesting ideas out of that hopefully we'll get to pursue. So, yeah, I think as much as you can make your design process collaborative, so people kind of feel invested in what they're doing. Like it helps.
Yeah, I have lots of times. I'm really particular and like I'm hard-headed and stuff. Where I'll come up with an idea and I think like this is exactly how it should be, but then we'll have like 10 people in a room and somebody will come up with something and I'll be like, yeah, that's way better than what I had in mind. So we should go with that.
So you definitely need like direction and some level of leadership and some level of like an overview. But the more you can get, that's a level designer's job. Like a game designer can design the concept of a game or whatever, but then a level designer can come in and make a fun encounter or experience, and then an artist can add elements to that. So I don't know.
Cool. All right, do we have any other questions from Matt and Andrew? Bill? Yeah, sure.
Well, I came in late, so I don't know if this is asked already. So, but basically, it's like, let's see, what kind of, is this a, trying to think. I was just basically wondering if you basically started from other jobs to form this company, form your company. What were some of the obstacles you had to actually transition from your old job to your new job, basically?
Before I worked here, I had no degree in computer science or anything like that. I worked at Petco, and I would literally clean rat poop day in and day out. Like, that was what I did before I got this job. And to get it, I just bought, I bought a book, and I learned C# 4 weeks. I had experience in ActionScript 3 and a little development here and there, but I just really wanted a development job where I could improve my skills. I didn't even enter it thinking I'd be making games. I thought I'd be making, point-of-sales apps and things like that in C#. So I just knuckled under and studied really hard on my own, and got it. And just you got to learn and be really tolerant of making mistakes and doing things wrong the first time and things. I had a lot of that going on when I first started. So I hope that sort of answers that question. Andrew had a different experience.
Yeah, for me,
altogether.
it was something where when I was a kid, my mind was set. I wanted to make games as growing up, and I feel like I'm on my path. Like I haven't reached the pinnacle yet. I feel like I'm here and I'm making mobile games, but I'd like to transition to eventually I'd like to work on some bigger AAA titles and things like that. But so knowing what I wanted to do when I was so young, I went to workshops and things like that, and I went to the Gatton Academy at Western and focused on computer science. And so I graduated when I was 19. And I'm 21 now, and I've been working at Hitcents for about 2 years. And so it's something where I wanted to get an early start on it so that I could eventually work where I wanted to. So what I was talking about is when I was a kid, I made a bunch of little crappy games that, I mean, they weren't too fun, but they were experience that I made. So I made games that I thought were fun. And so I was able to use the experience that I had there, and I guess to answer the question, before I worked at Hitcents, I was a computer science tutor. I worked at Bowling Green Tech, and then I worked at Western Kentucky University as a computer science tutor. And during that time, I was working on my own projects, and so eventually I heard from one of my friends that there was an opening at Hitcents, and so I applied and I showed them what I had, what my projects were. And I think that was the biggest point, was just showing what you're capable of by past projects and things like that. So.
Yeah, and I guess that's to tie those things together. The biggest thing is if you want to make games for money, start by making games for free. Make really small games. Do that. It's so important to have a portfolio or any kind of something to show off. It's more important than any kind of I can claim I have this knowledge, but if I can actually show I've done it, I've got this prototype of a game, or I've got this even web game online or anything like that, it's really cool to have that, and that helps make games for money if you want to.
I think we've been we try to do that through game jams and things, and then a bunch of us have our own projects that we're working through, in addition to the couple of studios in town. Did you guys have? Yeah.
So how do you approach bringing someone on the team? What do you look for someone who will join the project? What process? What, I guess, maybe beyond just the skills, what do you look at someone, the personality or anything like that you want to see in someone working for your team?
I think the ability to work with a team is probably the most important thing. Like, even if it was somebody that was particularly very, very, very skilled, but they were just so introverted or somehow just disagreeable that they couldn't communicate or like collaborate with other people, that's a huge thing. So it's one's ability to express their ideas clearly in a group environment and take criticism well, and all that kind of stuff is so vastly important. And it's something that I think, I mean, to me, even personally a little bit, and I think anybody that's kind of a gamer or plays games, like, I don't want to speak for everybody, but I know I'm not the most socially agreeable person all the time. Like, I think that, I don't want to generalize gamers, but I think, like, that's a common experience. So being able to just work with other people and communicate with other people and that's so important, I guess.
Yeah. And I think a big part of it is also just situational. Like, if we have an idea and we have something we have to pursue, we have to go find somebody that can do that. So, like, we had to hire really quickly. We had to go find a 3D artist so that we could start working on Object 2, since we decided we were going to do it in 3D. And that opened up the door for us. We've made some other apps that allowed us to move on to other things like that.
We didn't work on it, but there's the Hanks typewriter thing that became, I think, #1 on the App Store, and we hired some 3D modelers to work on our video games, but they ended up like modeling typewriters and art assets for that. So just versatility, like, especially for us where we have a smaller team, like, it's great to be focused, but we have animators that also chip in on art, and we have, we're both programmers and we do music, so possessing more than one skill is also another important thing, like, especially for small teams.
Let's see. I was going to ask. So you guys are down in Bowling Green. We're in Lexington, Kentucky. There's another group called Game Dev Lou that's had spun up in Louisville, and I was wondering if Bowling Green, you guys know about any kind of like community groups for like game developers who are struggling on their own, or like looking for people to talk to or work with, collaborate down that way.
WPU we talked to.
Yeah, when I was at Western, I was the vice president of the game research group, which was it used to be a group there, and then they sort of fell out, and then we came back in and sort of revived it. And I know they're still going strong. There's a group at Western where they'll get together every Friday and they'll start making some games, and it's a neat thing. We went and talked to them a couple of weeks ago, and just talked about sort of the same thing we talked about here tonight. And I mean, as far as I know, that's the biggest thing here, but that seems to be exclusively for Western students, but I don't know if there's...
Yeah, I don't know of anything really community-oriented that's going on as far as anything as large as RunJumpDev or what's going on in Lexington or what's going on in Louisville with like hackerspaces and like game jams and things like that. Like, I wish there was more of that here, but yeah.
Cool, yeah. We've had limited contact with a group down in Nashville too. Who's Nashville Game Dev? That's what they were called. But yeah, it's kind of springing up in places where enough people kind of realize that these people are around them. I think that's really mostly what it is. It's just knowing that there are these other people who are in the same place as you that you can get together with. It doesn't take too many.
I think we have probably the biggest concentration of nerds here at Hitcents for like a 50-mile radius.
Well, yeah.
Sorry. So what kind of piece of advice or one thing did you wish that you knew, before, this new project or whatever? What kind of, in retrospect, you wish you knew before either starting game development or just where you are now?
I'll go ahead. When I made my first game, it was a sprawling 2D platformer roguelike that was going to be all these levels and just be enormous. It was, like it was going to have multiplayer and all this procedural generated content and everything. And I got a level done, you know. I got one level done, and that was after like a year and a half. So I think the biggest thing I wish I knew going in was like start small, like come up with a really small concept and focus on that first, and know that your first game like isn't gonna be your best game. It's gonna suck. Like that's not universally true, but like your very first game is not gonna be you at your best as a game designer or developer or whatever it is you're focusing on. So I think when you're first starting out, like start really, really small, like a simple concept that can get done real fast. That's what I wish I had known that when I first started making the games. And then going into Epic 2, I don't know. I think there's a lot we could have done. I don't know.
We need to keep our naming conventions straight.
Yeah, naming conventions are super important if you're working in a team of 10 to 12 people. Like, we still have files floating around our game that are like, oh, these letters, like the first letter of some words are capital, and then there's underscores everywhere. And it should have just been camel case. Everything should have been camel case. So.
With Battlepillars and Stickman, we had issues where they would be like, so for mobile games we had to have 3 different sizes of images, so we didn't load like on a really crappy phone. We wouldn't load like a massive image and take up all memory. So we made like small, medium, and large size images of everything. But then we would have the artists come in and make like a large rock, and so they would call it like rock large small and rock large medium and rock large large, and it's just like things like that just get crazy. But yeah, for me it's the exact same thing before I start. Like I have probably like 10 prototypes of games that I thought would be way bigger than they are, and they're just not. Like I worked on them for a couple weeks and then forgot about them because like eventually if you're stuck on one thing for too long, it's gonna get if it's not something you're super proud of. So I think for me that was a good experience. That I've got like I have a Google Doc that I keep for myself that's just like a bunch of ideas of games that I like. Once I got to a position where I feel like I could do those things for a long time, I might visit those ideas again. And so I think that's important for morale or whatever too. Is just that like when you have a really good idea, it's easy to get discouraged when you go at it for a month and then it's really boring to work on it anymore. But I like to keep those like stored up so I can like visit them again at some point, you know, when I'm more prepared. Yeah.
Andrew was actually really great with Battlepillars, and kind of Epic was if it's some monotonous, repetitive task, write a tool for it. Like write a program. If you have to rename 100 files, just write a program to do it. Like, if you have to color correct a ton of images, don't make an artist sit there and do it. Just write something that will do it. Like, even if it's going to take you long, once you get in the habit and like mode of writing tools to do that kind of stuff, it's better.
Yeah, a great example of that was when we were doing Battlepillars. We had to crush the images like crazy to get them to be under that 50 megabyte limit. So every time for a long time, we would take all our images, we would put them in sprite sheets, and then we would have to posterize sprite sheets so we would limit their color, then we would index some of them, and then we would go back and we would run them through like whatever the
PNG gauntlet.
Yeah, and then what was that pressure or whatever thing?
Yeah.
So it took hours to get all our images ready for a new build, and it was just too many times that we did that. So we went back and we wrote some tools to do it automatically, and then it's so much better. Like.
It's not the easiest process. I mean, it's not overly difficult, but it's not the best process to get an app from Unity onto an iPhone. Like, you have to go through Xcode, and Xcode's finicky. So that would always be like a little bit of a process. Not terrible, but now we have all that automated on a build server. Like, we just have to push buttons, and we've got builds up on test flight that everybody can test and things like that. So the more you can do that, the better.
Yep.
Cool. Well, I think we've used up our time, but it was awesome having you guys on. Thank you very much, Andrew and Hitcents.
Yeah, thanks to you guys.
Yeah, definitely. We'll make it up this way. So we'll finish it out with RunJumpDev. We're here in Lexington. We do meetings twice weekly, Mondays and Tuesdays. Monday is kind of a indie game night where people bring in games that they've been playing or they want to kind of like talk about from a science perspective, look at them and figure out how they work, how they don't. Tuesday is kind of a larger general hack night. If you've got a project going on that you want to bring out and get playtesting on, ask questions, just like hackathon a bit, if time like around other people do the same thing. Tuesday nights, both of those start around 6 p.m. and they're downtown at Awesome Inc. on Main Street. And then, of course, once a month we do a monthly meeting where we have wonderful guests such as Matt and Andrew from Hitcents, who talk to us on kind of more of a directed topic, like a talk format. And this month we're a little early. Normally it's the last Wednesday of the month, but since this month and next month we have holidays to contend with, we're bumping it up by a week. So it's actually the December 15th will be the next one of these for us. Yeah, and we good luck with the last few doing kind of an online format. So we're going to try and keep that going with streaming these things so people who can't make it or couldn't make the time can look us up later. We've got a YouTube channel where this is going to be archived after, which if you guys have objections to, we can work that out. But yeah, that's us. So again, thank you very much for talking to us, taking the time. I really appreciate it.
Thanks very much. Cool. Thank you.
See you later.